I suppose that will do. For the moment, anyway.
Samantha stretched, bringing her arms up above her head. The carrier bag she held in her right hand rustled, the cans inside clinking together. She had dozed intermittently on the coach, her eyes flickering open every time the vehicle went over a bump in the road, and now she felt even sleepier than she had done before. Samantha didn't like taking naps, even though she often felt tired these days. They never made her feel better. As such, she had vowed to herself that she was going to rectify this problem, if not for her own sake, then for Roberta's. She couldn't imagine that her friend was happy about being used as a pillow. When the bus stopped at a service station, Samantha's first port of call had been a small shop within the building, namely, to the aisle that sold energy drinks. She had brought 4 or 5 cans of some random drink. She had never had that brand before, but the can was decorated in tiger print, so it must have been effective, right? And was now making her way back to the coach. The sky above her head was overcast, festooned with grey clouds. Though the sky seemed to promise rain, the air was cool and crisp. It was a sharp contrast to the air inside the coach, which was stuffy and oppressive, having been filtered through almost 30 mouths millions upon millions of times. The outside world felt, and smelt, far cleaner. It was refreshing. Samantha had no real desire to set foot back on the coach again. It felt supremely self-defeating, like bricking oneself up behind a wall. Unfortunately, she did not have much of a choice. With a resigned sigh, Samantha stepped back onto the coach. Instantly, she was greeted by rows of red chairs lined up neatly beside one another, like unusually garish graves in a graveyard. Samantha was not fond of coaches. She found their movements lurching and unpredictable, and she hated being confined within them. Just how much further did they have to go anyway? Samantha thought to ask the driver, but he wasn't there. In fact, after scouring the coach, Samantha soon discovered that she was one of the only people there. A couple of girls were sat in the middle of the coach, both asleep, and Samantha could spy a familiar splash of bright blue hair to her left, but that was it. And speaking of bright blue hair, Samantha tensed. Just how many other people at St. Mary's had such an outlandish hair colour anyway? Died, obviously. It could only be one person. Tabitha De Quincey, known to most of the girls at St. Mary's as De Quincey, was seated near the front of the coach, hunched over herself so her back made an arch. She was holding something in both of her hands, and Samantha noted her shoulders were shaking. Upon further investigation, Samantha discovered, with no small amount of alarm, that De Quincey was crying. She could not see the girl's face, but she could hear her. Small, broken sobs emitted from her mouth, even though it seemed she was trying as hard as possible to rein them in. Samantha's grip on her carrier bag tightened. The plastic crackled. What should she do? She still had not forgotten what had occurred between herself and De Quincey a couple of months ago, and, as close as the two girls had once been, Samantha had been trying her very best to avoid De Quincey ever since that day. Should she continue to uphold her resolution, even now? She was the only person right now who knew De Quincey was crying, so did that make it her responsibility? What if something bad had happened to the other girl? The sudden death of a family member, a close friend, a beloved childhood pet? Samantha dithered uncomfortably, unsure. Even though De Quincey was in tears, it had nothing to do with her. She did not owe De Quincey anything, even though she had, Samantha reflected with a twinge of guilt, borrowed all that money from her last term. Moreover, she may have been sobbing over something private, something she did not want others to know about. Asking her about it could very well make the matter worse. De Quincey was so lost in her mourning, she had not even noticed Samantha was there. Samantha could easily have slipped past her, back into her own seat, without her even knowing Samantha had seen her. It was perfect. It was perfect. So why weren't her feet moving? Would her conscience let her ignore the girl who had once been her friend? Personally, I think it would be a bit of a dick move to ignore someone who's crying. We're going to approach her.
De Quincy?
Samantha approached the girl slowly, with the same hesitancy one would if they were dealing with a rabid dog. Just what was she expecting anyway? Did she think De Quincy was going to bite her? The other girl might have been somewhat shameless, but not even she could have done something that outrageous. Not while sober, anyway. Drunk, on the other hand... No, Samantha did not want to think about that. She was not thinking about that. De Quincy lifted her head, blinking up at Samantha. Her eyes were red and puffy, swollen from tears, and she looked so very pitiful, Samantha found she could not remain anxious for too long. What did she have to be afraid of, really? De Quincy looked like a wreck. She looked even more miserable than Samantha had felt these last 3 months, which was quite an achievement.
Sam? You're finally speaking to me, after all this time.
I suppose I am. I couldn't just ignore you, not when you look so miserable. It would be unforgivable, I think. Even though Samantha had, for a few moments, been pondering whether she should do exactly that, she still didn't tell De Quincy that, though. She didn't need to know.
Sam. Oh, Sam. And I thought you would never speak to me again. You really are a sweetheart after all.
Perhaps. I find it hard to keep grudges. They all seem so pointless. They just make people unhappy.
That's true. I've been feeling quite bad over what I did. I know I shouldn't have done it. I'm just impulsive, I suppose.
De Quincy smiled shakily through her tears, which were still dripping down her cheeks, and sniffed. She wiped her eyes with the back of her arm, perhaps attempting to make herself more presentable, and sat up a little straighter. So, if you don't mind me asking, and the subject matter is not too delicate for you to discuss, why are you crying? Did something bad happen?
Something bad, huh? I guess you could say that. It was pretty bad.
What was it?
It's hard to explain. I don't know if you would understand. Maybe nobody would.
Maybe not. We all grieve in different manners. But if there's anything I can do to help, do not hesitate to ask. I can hardly leave you when you look so very unhappy.
Thanks. Well...
De Quincy gave Samantha a watery smile, her lower lip trembling.
I guess there's no easy way to deal with such a thing. The death of a loved one is always painful. It hurts. Though I know it's silly, it really does hurt.
Samantha's eyes widened. So it was as she had thought. De Quincy really had lost a loved one, and recently too, by the sounds of it. Samantha was no stranger to bereavement. Her own father had died when she was only 7 years old, and it was a memory that had stayed with her, following from place to place more persistently than her own shadow. She could remember sitting in the parish church of Ottery St. Mary, with its vaulted ceiling and stone arches, listening to the vicar as he conducted his service. Samantha had grown restless and started to gnaw on her fingernails during the vicar's speech, nibbling them down to stumps. Her mother had noticed and had been less than impressed. Through her tears, her mother had taken hold of Samantha's hand, crushing Samantha's fingers beneath her own, with little too much strength, and had hissed at her to just sit still and listen. That had stung. Samantha hadn't been fidgeting out of callous carelessness. She had loved her father. She still loved him even though he was dead. She had been fidgeting because she had been anxious, and she had been sad, and she had been trying to distract herself from her own melancholy thoughts, which were growing more and more oppressive by the second. But her mother had not known. Her mother never knew that. She never had been able to understand how Samantha thought. Samantha didn't want to be like her mother, curt and inconsiderate. Instead, she wanted to be kind and caring. maybe that was why she had, despite her own worries, chosen to pause and speak to De Quincey. Now that she had committed herself, she could not just turn and leave.
I really am sorry for your loss, Tabitha. When did you hear the news? Oh, it was fairly recent. Only a few minutes ago, actually. A few minutes?
Samantha frowned. What did De Quincey mean by that? Had one of her family members sent her a text message? That must have been it. That sounded like quite a harsh way to break the news over a recent death, though. Technology was convenient, but it could be so impersonal.
That's right. It was so sudden, too. I mean, I already got a few bad endings, but I really thought I could prevent it this time. I was so convinced. I thought I made all the correct choices, but in the end, it still didn't work. Hannah still died. My cute little Hannah. Why must the world be so cruel?
Samantha blinked. Now, for the first time, she was beginning to wonder whether she had been labouring under misapprehension.
What do you mean, bad endings? I don't quite understand. I thought you wouldn't. That's what I said.
People don't play these kinds of games very much, so they're pretty obscure. Is she crying over a friggin' Tamagotchi?
There really are. There are some really good ones, though.
A game? You were crying over a game?
That's right. Look.
De Quincey pre-offered the plastic object she was holding in her hand to Samantha. She was crying over a friggin' Tamagotchi. Samantha took it. She had not known what it was at first, being more focused on De Quincey's tear-stained face than what she had been holding, but now, all at once, she suddenly understood. It was a handheld games console. On the screen was displayed an image of a cute girl. Her eyes were closed and she was lying in a hospital bed, her black hair fanning across her pillow. There was text at the bottom of the screen, perhaps to explain what was happening in the scene. Samantha wasn't sure. She did not play many games other than fantasy RPGs, and that was only occasionally because she liked the music and the fantastical environments. Even so, Lillian was far better than she was, particularly during the boss battles. Samantha's fingers started to shake. So, this whole time, she had been comforting De Quincey, not over the death of a friend or a family member, but over the death of a girl called Hannah? A girl who did not exist, never had done, and never would? Well, now she felt like an idiot. De Quincey smiled up at Samantha, her head tilted to one side. The worst thing was, there was no trace of ill intent on De Quincey's face. Her expression was completely innocent. It was clear she had not been intending to trick Samantha. Samantha had simply jumped to conclusions and had managed to make a fool out of herself.
That always happened. Hey, do you want to borrow this game after I'm done? It's really emotional. I cried loads, even though this is my third playthrough. Hannah's death scene always gets me, every single time. But she isn't real. Hannah might not be real if you were to go by dictionary definitions, but she exists within my heart. In the universe of that game, I am Takumi, and I really am her big brother. I must protect Hannah, no matter what. I'd even give my life for her, if necessary. That's how much I love her. You know what? Samantha smiled a strained smile and handed the console back to De Quincey. Her movements were stiff, as though her bones had turned into stone. I think I'll pass if it's all the same to you. I'm going back to my seat now. Good luck with the rest of your game. Sam? Wait up! De Quincey called after Samantha, retreating back, but it was already too late. The tentative peace which had blossomed between the two girls had already met its demise at the hands of a sudden winter snowstorm. Hey, Sam? Sam!
Samantha frowned. She could see Roberta opening and closing her mouth just like a fish, but she couldn't hear what she was saying. Samantha's ears were filled with music, and everything else was muffled.
Jeez.
Roberta sighed, and with one swift motion, she reached forwards and plucked one of the buds out of Samantha's ear.
Ah!
Samantha blinked as though waking from a long dream, her lashes trembling. Can lashes tremble?
Hello, Bobby.
What is it?
You should know. If I knew, I wouldn't be asking.
A sigh.
All right, Miss Cleverclogs. Turn the volume down already. I don't want to spend the whole journey
With your weird Germanic chanting? What?
with your weird Germanic chanting playing in the background.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is she into metal or something? Like heavy metal? Samantha fished her music player out of her pocket and clicked a few buttons. She always listened to music at full volume. I can't stand people like that. It was a bad habit, like biting her fingernails and cracking her wrist, one that she had never been able to shake, no matter how often Roberta scolded her. Some people listen to music to help them concentrate on boring tasks, but Samantha did precisely the opposite. She listened to music, loud and oppressive, to stop concentrating so she could disengage from all her worries. And Samantha had a lot of worries.
Honestly, you'll go deaf one of these days and you'll have only yourself to blame.
Yes, Roberta.
Can you even understand half the music you listen to anyway?
Samantha smiled sheepishly, pressing her two index fingers together as she pondered her reply. I know a few words here and there. My German isn't that bad. However, it wasn't at the level where she could have been able to go to Germany and ask for directions, or order food. The few phrases that Samantha had picked up after listening to all that German folk metal weren't particularly useful. Mostly, they were overwrought with expressions of deep Germanic angst. Then again, that suited Samantha perfectly.
I don't really get it. Why is it always German? It's the only music you ever listen to.
I'm not entirely sure. I just think it sounds passionate.
You would think that. You can't understand what they're saying after all.
I suppose so. Maybe I'm just imposing my own meaning onto the lyrics. But is that really such a bad thing? People do that all the time. Isn't the simple act of having a conversation all about deriving your own interpretations of other people's words?
That's pretty deep for 9:30 in the morning, isn't it?
I apologise. Maybe I woke myself up a little too efficiently. Samantha held up a half-empty can of the tiger print energy drink, which she had been resting between her thighs for the last 10 minutes or so. Roberta eyed the now lukewarm can with an untrusting eye.
Just how many of those have you had anyway?
In the last half hour? I think this is my third.
Your third?
That's right. Is there anything wrong with that? Roberta stared. Maybe she should have followed Samantha when they stopped at the service station a while back. Samantha obviously couldn't be trusted to make decisions on her own.
Stuff like that isn't good for you, you know. Especially not in such large doses. You'll make yourself sick and you'll rot your teeth.
Maybe, but...
But?
It did help wake me up, didn't it?
And you wonder why your stomach hurts so often. You're poisoning your body.
That's what Lillian says too. Or said, rather, because Lillian did not speak to her anymore. Samantha winced at the thought. She had been stung. As though she had been stung. For some reason, Roberta too looked disgruntled. More so than she had done when she had been berating Sam for her caffeine addiction.
What does Lillian have to do with anything?
I just thought, since she always told me off, maybe I should quit.
Oh, so you'll listen to what Lillian says, but you won't listen to me? Is that what you're saying?
Samantha's grip around the can of drink tightened. It crumpled underneath her fingers, leaving indents in either side.
You do know Lillian has no interest in speaking to you again, don't you? It doesn't matter what you say or do now. She doesn't care.
I know that, but she means a lot to me.
And I don't?
I never said that, Bobby. You're jumping to conclusions. Samantha bit down on her lower lip. How could she explain herself when she did not fully understand what she meant either? What should she do? Let's apologise. I mean, she's like our biffle right now.
I'm sorry, Roberta. I do value you, really. You have a funny way of showing it. It is difficult to believe such assertions when you so constantly do and say things that make me believe quite the contrary.
I know that. I realise I'm not the best friend. I'm fickle and flighty, and I either demand too much of your attention or want none of it at all. I'm not particularly good at expressing myself, and when I try to explain how I feel, the words come out all jumbled up, as though they were spoken by somebody else. I really am sorry if I said or did anything to upset you. You know, Samantha's fingers curled into fists, taking fistfuls of fabric from her skirt with them. Lillian is my friend. Or was, rather. Samantha winced. Thinking about her friendship with Lillian in the past as opposed to the present was still upsetting, even now. But you're my friend too. Please forgive me. I know you have to put up with a lot, and I realise I can be incredibly annoying.
You really can. You're the most annoying person there is.
I know. It's the only area I excel at, really. Roberta tried to remain aloof, but she could not. Samantha's wry comment slipped through a crack in her armour and, unbidden, raised a small smile to her lips.
Well, they do say if you have it, you should flaunt it. In this case, however, I would not recommend it.
I'll do my best. But I have precious little else to flaunt. In the end, maybe being annoying really was the only talent she had. Now that was a depressing thought.